Okay. Peter Bartesch, welcome to the Art of Alpha.
Oh man, I'm excited.
Me too, man. This is kind of like where the dream becomes real, I guess.
That's right.
Been talking about this for a while. I don't know where to begin. Well, the Art of Alpha.
Yeah.
Alpha has a couple of different meanings, and which I guess we can go into at the beginning here, but then maybe we should start with the end in mind. The purpose of this is to build a community, right?
That's right.
Try to build a group of individuals aligned under common set of values that I guess have trust in one another. And, somewhat of a traditional thing, right? Like we're kind of getting back to the old ways. I don't think we're really doing anything new here. We're kind of rediscovering a lot of old ways.
That's right. I think the esoteric and the scientific have come together in our common era really well. And we're getting the language that is speaking to what esoteric philosophy has been pointing to for a long time. So we're both philosophers and we were looking to apply that, applied philosophy.
Yes.
Yeah.
It feels funny to say that because that title was given to me. They were like, oh, the Bitcoin philosopher. And I was like, okay, I'll take it. Sounds amazing. But yeah, now I think taking that idea seriously, right? The love of wisdom. Well, what does wisdom mean? Something like don't act foolishly. And how do you not act foolishly? Well, you embody these tried and true principles of living that people have lived by for thousands of years, and something that unfortunately we've lost in the mainstream today.
What is truth?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, wisdom is the pursuit of truth.
Yeah. 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 And that's something we said in the end of this outline here, right? The idea of getting people to, if your body is your temple, to have your body become a temple of truth. Truth meaning there's like the pragmatic sense of truth, right? What actually works for being a good person and being competent, being effective in the real world, being a good leader, being a good person, being skillful, being useful to others, etc.
Yeah, I think we often here in the West think of the truth as some kind of analytic meaning, some propositional truth.
Yeah.
And what can we utilize to get to some ends?
Yeah.
And I believe truth is really just in harmony with the universe.
Yeah.
Certain vibration, certain frequency, getting that aligned, and then that will guide a lot of the tools and technologies today's world to take us to a better harmonious place that maximizes human flourishing.
Yes. Yeah. So getting back into alignment with nature, right? Not fighting the tide. It's like we were talking about earlier, when you wipe out surfing, the worst thing you can do is struggle.
Yeah.
Try to swim against it. That's literally the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
You got to just go with it.
Yeah. There's an art to that.
Yes. So let's start. We're going to go through kind of a sweeping philosophical landscape today, talking about, these things are unavoidably personal. It's like things we've gone through in life, and then things we've learned and ways we've learned to apply those lessons into our life to become better people. And then this is really the art that we're trying to obviously continually hone within ourselves, but also share with others. And in sharing with others, obviously make it better for ourselves as well at the same time, right? That's the essence of community. So given that this is a personal thing, let's start with our personal journeys. People probably know enough about me at this point, so let's start with you. You are a yoga teacher. You are a philosopher, as you said. So how did you end up on this path? I don't know if it's career path, life path, both. That you are, you are studying philosophy, but you're also embodying philosophy through the practice of yoga. How did you get here?
So, I was always an athlete, always someone very embodied in myself, just loving to move. And I got into wrestling in high school. I was a very skinny guy, small guy, kind of late to hit puberty. And I really embraced that, honestly. I liked being small and fast, and I have to be kind of witty in a way, I guess, not just intellectually, but physically witty. Just when you watch small wrestlers wrestle, it's much different than watching big guys wrestle. And so I hit the weight room to start putting on some strength and muscle for wrestling, and just fell in love with it. So I started doing personal training pretty young because I just dived in. in high school, I had a lot of passions and I just wanted to pursue those passions, and philosophy, health, all those things really coalesced together. And from there, I tried yoga and I just loved it immediately because it was challenging. You know, like the first class I ever did was really probably the hardest class I ever did. Not because it was technically the hardest class, but because, geez, down dog was just making me sweat bullets. So I liked the challenge right away. And there's a lot of philosophy in yoga as well. People may or may not know that, you know, yoga isn't just doing what we call asana, which asana is a word that means seat in Sanskrit, but we kind of colloquially mean it as pose.
Right.
And so people think, yeah, yoga is a workout, but yoga is definitely not a workout. You know, it's a work into your nervous system, work into your body, work into your energetics. And so, you know, you can take that application of mindfulness and apply it into many things, but it really, it's just so suited well for being in these poses. You know, for lifters who are used to the concentric phase and the eccentric phase, you know, curl it, drop it, pick it up, toss it, anything like that. Isometrically holding something is pretty difficult. And the best way to sustain these postures is through diaphragmatic breath. So you're really moving your diaphragm and you're breathing into the lower lobes of your lungs. You have receptors in the lower lobes of your lungs that calm your nervous system, kind of get your parasympathetic nervous system turned on. And that helps to calm the nervous system, calms the muscles, which allows the muscles to open up. And if you're breathing up top in the upper lobes, that kind of puts you in that fight or flight response. And breathing through your mouth as well, you actually dry out your lungs when you breathe through your mouth. You don't get the same oxygen optimization. So breathing through the nose is really important. It helps to humidify the breath, to keep the lungs moist, which means you don't need to drink water as much through the practice. You also release a lot more nitric oxide when you breathe through your nose, which has the ability to calm you, the ability to open up the muscles, pull oxygen into the muscles, pull lactic acid out of the muscles. So nasal breathing is really important. Here in the West, you know, people a lot of times are breathing through their mouth, and so they're over breathing, but they're under oxygenated. And you know, yogis will sometimes talk about you have a certain amount of heartbeats in your life, and if you can slow your heart rate down, you can essentially expand your life force.
Right.
And we say pranayama, like pranayama is breath work, but prana is like chi or life force, and yama is to stretch. So pranayama is like life force stretching. And you can really practice it. You know, it doesn't have to be like a kind of pranayama. It can just simply be longer held breath, longer suspended breath. I personally really love to exhale and suspend my breath slowly, for longer durations. Yeah. And you actually build up your tolerance to carbon dioxide when you practice that. And carbon dioxide is a signaling mechanism that tells your body, uptake more oxygen. And it's a purifying molecule. So when you're doing breath holds, like for surfing, you get knocked off that wave, you're under the water. The moment when you feel like you need to inhale, you actually have quite a lot more air to go because your hemoglobin is going to release more oxygen. So you're going to consume the oxygen that's in your bloodstream really fast, but then there's more stored up in your body. So if you can be meditative, you can calm yourself, you actually can extend that duration for not needing to inhale. And so diaphragmatic breathing, and we call it also ujjayi breath, where you're like kind of controlling right down here, your trachea, what you call your Jalandhara Bandha, like a kind of like the sound of a wave, bringing in fresh nutrients as the ocean comes in, pulling out like sediment out of the body as the wave pulls off the beach. And so, you know, that applied, I take that into a lot of my trekking because I trek around the world in the mountains, high altitude mountain hiking. It's same thing, you know, you're not getting as much air in your breath. So how you manipulate your breath really helps you to keep going. If you're breathing really fast, you take in a puff of air, your lung kind of gets saturated, and then you're like, and into the next breath. If you can slow down the beginning of the inhale, you can actually permeate your lungs a lot more and better optimize the oxygen supply. And that will, of course, give you better performance, calmer mind. So yeah, again, just all those modalities I was learning in yoga really applied to everything in my life. The Yoga Sutras, which is kind of like the Bible for yoga. Chakras, learning about these energy portals in the body and how they correlate with certain physiological organs. how they correlate with different psychological developmental stages as you're growing. Just all things that really fascinated me. So yeah, I mean, I've been doing personal training. I was teaching Pilates before I was teaching yoga. I was studying in university before I went all full on into yoga. So I'm kind of a little bit across the board. My yoga class, I like to teach some kind of like mobility exercises as well, not just like your traditional asana poses. You know, because of that, I get a lot of men in my classes because I was not flexible when I started yoga, you know, and I really fell in love with yoga when I went to advanced class. So the teacher was teaching scorpion pose, which is a handstand back bend. And I was just like, oh my God, this is insane. And these women who were like all much older than me, just doing insane things. And I was like very inspired, not intimidated. Right. And some people, of course, are going to have the reaction of intimidation. Like, oh, this isn't for me. Like, you know, that's your ego getting in the way. And I didn't think I would even be able to accomplish a lot of those poses, but I just was like, I'm going to work towards it. And it's just amazing that yoga's really taught me what practice, diligence, patience, where it will take you. And yeah, so I'm still shocked to see that I'm still like progressing further. Yeah, there's definitely a balancing of the yin and the yang, the flexibility and the strength, because I still do weightlifting. And it can be tough to go from like heavy deadlifting to deep back bending. Because when you're lifting heavy, your body wants to create structure and kind of tighten up. The myofascial sheath around the muscle will oftentimes get pretty tight. And that structure actually protects you a bit from injury when you're lifting heavy. And then you go and you start bending really far. It can be intense. So I've also learned kind of how to navigate that pathway of where I'm steering off too much into strength, I'm getting too stiff, where I'm going like too much into flexibility, I'm kind of getting too loose and limber. I mean, it really depends on your goals, of course. But, you know, I want to be strong and flexible and have endurance and, you know, be athletic. So I'm mixing all those things. And again, I wasn't flexible when I started. So I teach in my classes how to build flexibility, not just like, oh, you stop at this pose and then you just hold it. No, there's once you're done moving, there's still a lot of energetic movement. Like you might be done moving on the outside where I can't see you moving, but if you're a little more advanced in your practice, you're still moving again that diaphragm and you're pushing energy around in your body, and just visualizing it takes you really far. You know, it matters where envisioning where you're breathing, envisioning the blood flowing. And I have other little tricks of kind of how to expedite gaining flexibility. But yeah, so, you know, like I'll have women in my class who want to achieve advanced postures and they're very flexible, but perhaps they're not strong enough. And then men who might be strong enough, or women who might be strong enough for a certain pose, but not flexible enough. So that's what I try to highlight for people is kind of what is it that you need here to advance to more advanced postures. But maybe again, your goal isn't really to achieve more advanced postures. Maybe it's how do you find more stillness? How do you find more equanimity in these poses? And I mean, that's what yoga is really designed for, is it's like, you're going to get into these poses and what is your reaction? Is it like, oh crap, get me out of here? Or like, oh, I'm bored? Or, you know, the body becomes the dojo, the training ground for then off the mat, you find yourself in these other scenarios where, oh, I notice I'm holding my breath. I notice I'm biting my jaw, or I'm like clenching my fist. And, you know, and I see this a lot with a lot of my clients too, you know, oh, I had that stressful day and now they got all this neck pain radiating. And so with all my clients, I'm doing different things, really whatever it is they need to just really move energy, you know. It's always working with the nervous system. That's like the master keyboard, or the master control board.
You were saying the science of energy transmutation is a definition of yoga.
Yoga, like kind of a lot of times people say yoga means to yoke, like to yoke to the divine, to yoke to the universe. But broader, I'd say, it's kind of a science of energy transmutation. I mean, there's 4 branches of yoga. So there's jnana yoga, which is like the yoga of knowledge, so scriptures, philosophy. Then there's karma yoga, the yoga of action. Bhakti yoga is the yoga of devotion, sort of like dancing, chanting, praying. And then there's Raja yoga, and Raja means king. So under Raja yoga, you have Hatha yoga. Hatha means like sun and moon. So again, that yin yang balance. And those are all the posture yogas that we're kind of familiar with here in the West.
Gotcha.
And so Raja Yoga is, again, moving your bandhas, like you have your pelvic floor bandha, lifting that pelvic floor will move a lot of energy up the spine. We call that Mula Bandha. Your diaphragm, we call that Uddiyana Bandha. So manipulating that. These bandhas, and the energy portals in your throat, like I was talking about, they can create pressure changes in your body, and you can really move energy. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but like I notice it quite saliently when I'm like, I'm a little moody, I'm having a bad day. I go to the gym, 30 minutes in, I'm feeling better.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You know, and it's like, doesn't even need to be a good workout, right? Like it's just moving.
Yeah.
And so that tool is really there for all of us. You don't even need to go to the gym, right?
Yeah.
Like out for a walk, Tai Chi, Qigong, just simple, even just simple mindful stretching or meditation. I mean, meditation can be very challenging for people. Like if you've never sat still, it's quite challenging. And if you're tight in the hips, you know, quickly your back might start hurting. So I think meditation is like really the most powerful tool to get to higher states of consciousness, to get to a state of equanimity, to a state of peace, love, contentment. But it's challenging. Like movement, I think is easier portal for people.
Yeah.
Like I've noticed certain studios that have, I'd say, kind of attract more of the type A person because the class flows very fast. And in that fast flow, people don't have enough time to think about their problems.
Right.
And that then gives their mind, their analytic prefrontal cortex to start to calm down. And now they're actually getting that moment of peace. It's very ephemeral for them.
Right.
I personally think, you know, the postures, you get a lot more benefit out of the postures when you hold them. Sure. You your body gets a little more time to adapt. But it's really challenging for a lot of people to stay in a posture. So again, just energy. We're energetic beings, and let's move to move energy.
Yeah, no, there's a lot there. Wrestling was your first sport, sounds like?
No, I mean, I grew up, my dad was my baseball coach, soccer, like I played basketball for a short period, you know. I say kind of, I mean, I enjoy their fond memories, but like, shoot, I wish my dad had put me in gymnastics or martial arts and just things where your body is the vehicle, not these ball sports. You know, I mean, wrestlers are in high school. This is kind of immature, but like we walk around, guys would wear shirts that like, oh, other sports play with balls and we have balls. Right. But I mean, I don't want to take away from other sports, but just that wasn't for me, right? Yoga, I think, comes right out of wrestling because it's like you're using your body. You know, that is the ball. That is the playing field.
The yoga, or the body as the dojo, as you said in yoga, that really resonates because it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Musashi, that the way is in training. And he was referring, when he said the way, right, he's talking about, it's like the Tao, right? This is that thing that the pattern that animates the entire universe, right, of which we participate in. And the more that we can align with that pattern, the healthier we are, the calmer we are, the happier we are, all of these things. And so he said the way is in training, and it's as if life is really just this series of tests in a way, right? Like every day we have some challenge to overcome. We have some obstacle to deal with. And it seems like the best way to optimize that experience is to just constantly be preparing for the next thing. And yoga, it's so interesting because I did several sports when I was young. I did football, I did wrestling, Olympic weightlifting was my major sport for a long time. I did boxing, and then I discovered yoga in my early 20s, so 21, 22. And I remember my first yoga session too, because it was different than anything I'd ever done, right? I'd done tons of workouts, tons of sports, but the first time I did yoga, like the end of that class, I could feel that tingling energy like in my hands. And fortunately, I had a really good teacher, and like it was just I felt like borderline mystical experience, you know? Like it was like, what the hell was that? It was incredible. And the emotional training I got from it,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like you definitely, it's not just a workout, right? The workout's physical. I guess it helps with your determination and your goal setting to some extent, but yoga, it's almost hard to put into words what it does. There's an equanimity, as you said, that you get to that I don't find in other forms of exercise. And then so I became very captivated with yoga for a while. Did it pretty seriously for about a decade. And I think too that the original purpose of yoga was actually to train the body to be able to sit into meditation for longer periods of time.
Correct.
And so somewhat naturally I got into meditation through yoga and that had a ton of benefits for me as well. As someone that was a chronic overthinker, I think I even suffered, in retrospect now, I didn't know at the time, but I think I suffered from social anxiety. Meditation really helped to diffuse a lot of that, right? When I learned to disidentify from my thoughts and just tap into the being of just the raw breath of who you are, I don't know, the overthinking wasn't an issue anymore. Like I could turn that off, or not turn it off. You could just disidentify from it. It used to take me a long time to fall asleep at night because of that overthinking. But when I could disidentify, I could just fall asleep in minutes, right? And this was all, I think, a benefit of yoga, which was, or a benefit of meditation, which I came to through yoga. The other thing I learned in yoga that was very important that carried over to a lot of other aspects of my life, again, from an excellent teacher that I had, was that the breath is primary and the movement is secondary.
Yeah.
And the term is the term vinyasa, matching movement to breath?
It's vinyasa is like how you move from one thing to the next.
Yes.
So vinyasa yoga is like not quite as focused on the exact pose,
Right.
but the transitions between poses. Like Hatha yoga was more like you do this pose and okay, maybe then you just switch sides, right? So you can think of warrior one on like the left side and then you just like stand up and do it on the second side. And vinyasa is like you're going to now go down chaturanga, up dog, down dog, you're going to step forward the other side and you're going to make fancier and fancier kind of connections.
The primacy, when that point of the breath is primary, the movement is secondary.
Yeah.
That really impacted everything in my life, actually. Like to put the primacy on the breath in a like in a board meeting, right? In a stressful situation, I learned just through repetition of yoga, it's like, oh, you could always tap into that breath. And no matter what chaos is unfolding around you, like you could become a very strong rooted center of gravity in that chaos, and you can deal with it more effectively versus like getting caught up in it, right? If you're getting pulled every direction. So it's almost like, I feel like it helped me tap into my masculinity more just by learning how to control the breath. I could control myself. I could not control situations better, but respond to them more effectively, basically.
Respond versus react.
Yes. And then also, again, I had that long history of weight training, learning to match breath to movement. I actually carried that back into my weight training, and that was a game changer too, right? Now I'm really focused on the breath first and the movement secondary, where I'm not sure what I was doing before because I wasn't paying as much conscious attention to it.
Yeah.
But it definitely improved my workouts like noticeably just by really putting the emphasis on the breath and making sure it matched the movement always, you know? And so it starts to change the way you carry yourself, changes the way you work out, changes the way I read even, like
changes the way people perceive you.
Yeah, it changes the way people perceive. Yes, exactly. Also, anger was a thing I dealt with a lot in my early 20s. And after doing yoga, meditation pretty seriously for a number of years, by the time I was in my late 20s, people were always like, you have such a calming presence. You have such a nice...
It's beautiful.
And I'm like, wow, this is not...
Yeah.
No one's ever said that to me before.
Well, let me touch, you quoted Musashi, and the first Yoga Sutra by Patanjali is that yoga is now. So it's not when you roll out the mat and start practicing yoga. Yoga is now, and you have the ability to practice at all times. The second sutra is that yoga is the calming of the fluctuations of the mind. And there's this very thin distinction between breath and mind. that those two are really actually kind of linked.
That's right.
You know, breath is really unique because it's this portal. You don't think about breathing, you'll breathe. So it's part of the autonomic nervous system, but you can also manipulate it.
Yes.
So it's this portal between what is happening in your body.
Voluntary versus involuntary. Somewhere in between. Yeah.
You know, and we're now knowing that you can actually influence things that we thought in the past were you couldn't influence. Wim Hof with his breathing techniques and cold plunging, they're showing, you know, he can turn his immune system on. We can inject him with some viruses and he can kill those viruses. And they've replicated this on some of his students as well. And, you know, so there's a lot there. There's like a science there, again, energy transmutation that we haven't really touched on much here. And there's just like, we've dismissed that duality between the mind and the body, that like, the mind is one thing, the body's another. And no. At the bottom of the mind is the body, and at the bottom of the body is the mind.
Yes.
You know, when you're sitting in meditation, that's when you start to realize those things in a very embodied experience of like, you know, when I don't have this phenomenon, then it's not in my consciousness. When I'm not tasting this thing, eating this thing, it's not there. Like I like to have that conscious experience. I need to have some kind of physical stimulation. And sure, you can have thoughts about many things that aren't actually there, but that's, you know, your mind projecting things. But again, it's all coming out of the constituents of your body, out of the physical substrate of your body.
Absolutely.
You know, and sometimes we say you can't learn what you can't experience in your body. Yeah.
Yes. Even Nietzsche uses some term, I can't remember what, psychophysiology, right? Where you can't separate mind from body. This is a challenge AI researchers have now, you know, run into full stop. It's like you can't have artificial intelligence without that intelligence having some embodiment, basically.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And so there's a deep continuity between our psychology and our physiology. And it does change. Again, yoga was changing me, right? Like by consciously going through these practices, my demeanor was changing. My emotional state, the way I showed up was changing. But also the way you think actually changes. Like I think your ability to be cognitively flexible is somehow dependent on your physical flexibility in a way.
Yeah.
As strange as that may sound, but there's something to that. And this, something you said too about yoga as a celebration, right? Because there's something here. It's work, obviously. It's difficult. There's times in these poses where you're like, whoa. But the trick again is like not, unlike working out, where I feel like in the weight room, sometimes I'm trying to push through failure into the pain to like see what I'm made of. Yoga's a little softer, right? You're trying to get to that edge to where it's maybe uncomfortable, but you want to breathe comfortably.
Yeah.
Like the breath becomes the barometer of if you're pushing yourself too hard, right?
Yeah.
If you start to lose the breath, then you need to back off. And again, breath is primary, movement is secondary.
Yeah.
And so this idea that really getting, I've lost my train of thought actually. I need to do more yoga.
Well, you know, I mean, it's really important especially for back bending your breath. When you back bend, your heart rate naturally goes up, you know, and you want to protect yourself. And you hit the nail on the head as far as like, if you're losing your breath, you know you've gone too far. And what I was telling you earlier about yoga being play is that energy is its own delight.
Yes.
That was a William Blake quote that I was quoting. And for me, it's like, I just feel the ability to do these poses is a temporary gift that's been given to me, and I can harness that gift and work with it and develop it. But it starts with the foundation of, you know, I'm a body, I'm a healthy body with these certain capacities that I can work beyond or build. But there's something that was given to me.
Yes.
And then, you know, you can't force balance.
Yeah.
Balance is a balancing act.
Right.
And you have to find this mixture of softness with some stabilization to really have that balance. And that's the play.
Yes.
And Sanskrit, that's Leela.
Leela,
yeah. Which I know you know that.
Yeah.
That
great
book.
Great book by Bartesch. That's actually, I'm glad you said that because that's where I lost my train of thought was there's I don't know if pleasure is the right word, but there's a bliss, I guess, that you really can get into through yoga and through meditation that I haven't found anywhere else. Maybe there's a few other areas we'll talk about in the hedonic engineering area that you can also access this blissfulness.
Yeah.
But yoga and meditation seem to be a very reliable way to get there on a consistent basis. And you were describing yoga as a celebration in a way that you don't, as you were saying about, you were given these gifts, right? You're given the gift of health, vitality, the ability to know the pose. You can do that today, but not forever, right? There's going to come a time where you're not going to have that anymore. Yeah. So teaching you to embrace the present and harness the gifts that you have today in a way that reaps the fullness of life. You said something like, you don't own the poses. Yeah. You're actually renting the poses, right? Totally. So, and that's another interesting thing about yoga is that it is this body of knowledge or study that we have been passing on for thousands of years at this point.
The Buddhists in Buddhism, they talk about, you're really in luck because they believe in the idea of reincarnation. Yeah. So you can be born as a mosquito, a pig, any animal. And if you're born into the human life, that's really rare. Then if you're born into the human life where the Dharma, which is the teaching, exists, that's even rarer. And then if you're capable of actually learning the Dharma, that's even rarer. So when I'm reading Buddhist philosophy, it's like, wow, what a gift this is too. Because, I could easily, even today, in today's world where Buddhism spread around the world, I could still be somewhere where no one's telling me anything about this, or I don't have access to the internet to learn or the books. Or, and it's just, there's a responsibility that's passed on with that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And almost, again, the idea of the tradition stretching so far back into the past, it's the Lindy effect comes to mind, where if something's been around for a really long time, that's because it has a very significant utility. Yes. Even if you might not understand it. And so the fact that these practices have been passed forward for so many generations, and that we have the luxury of accessing them, practicing them, etc. A bit of a confession here, but it's like I told you I did yoga for 10 or 12 years. I've been kind of out of practice for the past 5 or 6 years. And I've noticed the opposite effect, right? Like I've become less cognitively flexible in a way. My body's not exactly the same as it used to be. And I feel very motivated to get back to that place where I was tapping into, feels like you're tapping into source, if you want to use that term, on a daily basis, right? Like you're getting out of the propositional mind and you're getting into just the raw energy of the body on a daily basis. And that gives you some balance in life, right? It gives you the decompression, the de-stressing.
Going into that responsibility is sometimes we say we thank the teacher, but we thank the teacher's teacher, the teacher's teacher's teacher, the teacher's teacher, all the way to the first teacher, which kind of then goes a little bit into like the unmoved mover. This is an idea in ontology, right? Of religion. How did God create move? If there was nothing, what started the first movement? It had to be the unmoved mover. And yoga, we om. Like Om, and that is spelled AUM, and it's supposed to be the rising of phenomenon, the continuation of phenomenon, and the cessation of phenomenon, which is the Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva in Hindu mythology or religion, and that's Om is the frequency, the vibration under all sounds, under all frequency. It's like God spoke word and creation, the universe came to be, and you can interpret that however you want, but on a, again, more scientific level, you would just say, everything has to have a vibration. All these atoms in this chair, they have to have a vibration, and you can access that unmoved mover, that first initial teacher, which was energy. It's all energy.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So the beautiful thing is that, isn't gains or improvement isn't linear. You practice yoga, you feel yourself slipping away a little bit. It's not like, oh, I went up here and now I'm down here and I have to go exactly the same path. You'll have still reap the karma, the action from the past, and you can apply some of that, and you can, leapfrog a little bit to quicker gains in the physical gross realm. That energy, it's not linear.
Yeah, for sure. And growth, not only is it not linear, but it's also inherently a traumatic process. Right? Like you've got to, this is working out, right? We're breaking things down to build them back up. It's creative destruction. It's that dance you described with the AUM. And participating in that way, in that dance consciously. If you try to resist, it's just like trying to resist the crashing wave, right? Like you're just in the resistance, you're actually going to harm yourself versus going with the flow, so to speak. This September 5th through 9th, 2024, join me on the Pacific coast of Mexico for our first ever men's retreat, which we are calling The Art of Alpha. In a cooperative training environment at a world-class retreat center, we will be having daily meditations, movement practices, yoga, cold plunging, infrared sauna, lymphatic drainage, massage, heart rate variability training, gut health lectures, all while enjoying an anti-inflammatory diet free of allergens and designed for optimal full body health. The retreat center is a gorgeous biohacker's paradise located right on the ocean. You can think of this place as a nervous system reset facility. At the Art of Alpha, we are seeking men who wish to cultivate freedom, wisdom, sovereignty, physical fitness, truth, and love in themselves and in those who look up to them. If you've always felt motivated to push yourself to new limits to discover the best version of yourself, but you've struggled to find the right community to immerse yourself in, then the Art of Alpha is for you. You'll be training alongside a group of men who have been individually selected for their outstanding self-discipline, virtue, and work ethic. To apply to join the first ever Art of Alpha event, go to breedloveevents.com. And yes, I did say you will have to apply, as we will be striving to gather a select group of men for this experience, so there will be an application process. Again, that's breedloveevents.com to apply to join us for the Art of Alpha on the Pacific coast of Mexico, September 5th through 9th, 2024. I want to get into hedonic engineering, because this is a topic you introduced to me, which, as you said earlier, might equally be called nervous system engineering.
Yeah.
Because it really comes down to, E equals MC squared told us everything's energy, right? Even matter is frozen energy, basically. So there's an identity, right, between energy and matter. So we think we're made of matter, but we're really energetic beings.
Yeah.
The nervous system is the electrical coordinating system of our material body. And there are a few different modalities we use to engage in this hedonic or nervous system engineering. I guess I'll just go through them one by one.
Well, I'll jump in and just say that hedonic engineering is a term that I got from Jamie Wheel, who wrote the book Recapture the Rapture.
Okay.
And he talks about these rapture periods in time when meaning is kind of shifting. The center of gravity of what society revolves around is kind of shifting. Meaning 1.0 was kind of religion. Meaning 2.0 is like the neoliberal agenda, the rational mind. Like, we can figure things out with these political organizations. We can make peace around the world. That hasn't really worked out fully, right? So people are getting disenfranchised with sort of the neoliberal cause. And also even just the limits of the rational mind and science. And it's like, okay, so what does meaning 3.0? Well, people have transcendent experiences. People have these, whether it is through meditation, whether it's looking at a sunset, whether it's through psychedelics, through sex. It's suddenly people have these experiences that, they say, this is the real. Like, this is not my normal aperture that I'm looking at reality with, but yet I know that this is like what is really going on, and we're creating this Maya, this illusion, this ego-driven world around it, above it. And so we are designed in our physiology to have these transcendent experiences. We're designed to create a greater meaning. And so how do you engineer that? So he talks about breath being number one,
Breath, yeah.
body embodiment, movement being number two, sex being number three, 4 being drugs.
Yeah.
And we take those unfortunately pretty irresponsibly here. But in the past, drugs were really ritual. Tobacco was ritual.
Right.
Even alcohol was ritualized in a lot of ways in some societies. And even cannabis has been cultivated for a long time. It comes from Tibet, but it was, cultivated. And there's also questions like, why do we have endocannabinoid receptors
in the body?
In the body. And so, the list goes on, and there's of course degrees of this. And then, also music, music. I think everyone can relate to that really well. It's just like, I hear the song and like tears come to my eyes, or I'm like, I got to get up, I got to move. And again, that goes to energy is delight.
Right. Right.
Dancing is like pure energy, and it's pure delight. And like, who is mad when they're dancing?
Right.
So bam, right there, like that's a quick, easy tool to shift your day.
Yeah.
And, maybe you got to fake it until a little bit.
Sure.
Like, the song's not really hitting, or, I can't. But like, we know, like if you smile, it's going to start having slowly some positive change in your body, even if you are faking it.
Right.
And, so it's just all these little different tools. I'm going to exercise. Okay. I feel a little bit better. Okay. I'm going to like fake smile. Maybe I can start feeling, I'll fake dance. All right. I'm starting, you start to crack it open.
Right.
Maybe I'll take a little bit, like don't get wasted. Maybe that one drink for some people, it just takes that edge off. Yeah. Okay. Well, again, like let's see these tools for what they are. How do we combine them together to really actually shift that barometer, or like that measurement of where you are, where you really are embodied in this moment.
Right. And so we're sort of like, obviously yoga is one way to hedonically engineer yourself. That would fall into the movement and breath category and meditation category perhaps as well. But there are these other ways, and some of these are taboo, right? Like when you say drugs, people are like, what do you mean? That's like, that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
You're going to tell people to do drugs. Like, well, no, not necessarily. But for some people, psychedelics and microdose occasionally, maybe a macro dose occasionally, helps them access this place in a way that's more, maybe not as deep and lasting, but at least reliable, right? Like if you take a certain dosage of psilocybin, well, you're going to experience something. And you can carry that forward, at least what I've noticed in my own personal experience with microdosing. It's not like that experience just stays there and it's not like there's an addictive aspect to something like psilocybin. You don't want to take it again to get there again. It's like you get there and you're like, okay, I see things that I couldn't see before. And then the lessons from that experience, you then can pull forward into your normal day-to-day experience, right? And so, I mean, the pattern I've observed with people that microdose is they tend to stop over time. Yeah. I'm not saying this, obviously I'm generalizing, but this is why psychedelics aren't addictive, right? And people have done studies on this and whatnot. The other thing was, well, obviously meditation we mentioned. Yeah. And then nature. Yeah.
Solitude.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my yoga. You talked about your first experience of yoga and just like feeling the energy. Yeah, I mean, I felt that too. Like the myofascial sheath opens, energy's flowing more easily. And I have seen and I've heard from a lot of people like, oh my God, yoga was this like saving grace thing. Yeah. For me, my yoga is that solitude time in nature. And so I really enjoy a lot of the aspects yoga has to offer, but it's like, that's the solitude, the quiet, being one with nature. That's really where like I'm feeling that union with the universe. And that's sort of like the bedrock. That's the thing I really fall to, this like that is nurturing.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you describe that sensation that you get? Would you use the word bliss as well? Because it's something that is absent for me at least, pre-yoga, pre-meditation. It was something that was basically absent from my life. That spiritual connectedness, that feeling of just dropping into yourself and being, I want to say happy, blissful, aware, connected. I'm not really sure. Like, when you say nature is your yoga or nature is your meditation, like how do you put that into words?
Yeah.
What that means to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, you've talked about in the past that language is just this tool that is not sufficient. So there's that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, bliss, yeah, but that's not enough, you know, I think there's just realization of the sacredness of the moment, a realization of like, this is creation. And I don't, you know, feeling like the universe witnessing me witnessing the universe. I mean, I would go out on these walks at night, and the entire town, I grew up in a suburb, it was quiet, and it was like the entire town was asleep, and I just felt like the whole world was mine.
Yeah.
You know, and it was transcendent. It was sort of like feeling of eternity in the moment, but knowing that the moment's still going to pass. And just, it's like you do want to kind of hold on to it, yet you know you can't. And, you know, I kind of had this realization of like, this is like heaven for me in a way of like, you know, I've imagined, because what is like the Christian idea of heaven? Okay, you're going to go behind the pearly gates, and what, you're going to be like at your prime physical state, because you don't want to be in heaven when you're like, you know, I died at 89, crippled, and now I'm in that state. So like, okay, and then what? Everything is given to you. Like you can have as much food as you want. You don't need to work. You can have as much sex as you want. But like humans have had the ability to chase those things and do that kind of endeavors to their end's desire, and realize that's not really actually fulfilling.
Right.
And so I realized it was like, if I can't be content here and now, I'm probably not gonna be able to do that anywhere. Yeah. You know, like, cause here I am, I'm with my dog that I kind of consider my brother, cause I grew up with him. Like I'm young, I'm healthy, like I'm not, and I'm secure, I'm safe. Yeah. You know, I think that's something that, of course, we have those needs that kind of need to be met. You know, and those that are really beyond attachments or inversions can like, you know, be very comfortable and in those states of beings and like pretty squalid kind of environment. But you know, if you're sheltered, if you're fed, your happiness is in your hands.
Right.
And, you know, so a lot of people, there's a bit of trauma and upgrowing and that they have to kind of deal with. Like, I wasn't loved unconditionally. I wasn't able to speak my truth. I wasn't able to pursue my dreams. So some of those things I think play a lot into people's kind of states of being. But again, if you kind of have your family, if you have self-acceptance, self-love, you know, you can carry that in a lot of scenarios, a lot of situations, and that equanimity, that is a peace. So I don't know, like bliss. It's blissful, but like peaceful, I think is a little bit more just the operative word. And I don't know, some people that sounds boring, I think. It's like, so you know, like, okay, cool. Like I want something exciting. I want something sexy. I want, you know, like the next adventure. And it's like, moving on to the next adventure. Like we don't want to get stuck in the present moment, but moving on to the next thing. Can you move on to the next thing without that attachment, without reaching to the next thing,
or holding on to the past? Right. Yeah. Something about, maybe like acceptance is a word that comes to mind, where when you do get into that place of, meditative bliss is the word I'll use. It's like there's no time, no space, there's no thoughts, but there's this subtle feeling of just enjoyment. You know, it's almost like it's a physically good feeling to just be there. Yeah. In a way that does make, I feel like meditation in a way does, I don't want to say it becomes addictive, but there, you know, you do want to get back there, basically, you know, and it's, and then somehow the paradox is you go to that place, no time, no space, no thinking. Yeah. But then when I come out of that, all like, I'm super creative, I'm super tuned in, I'm feeling good. Like everything in life seems to get better. Sleep gets better, food tastes better, sex is better. Like all of the experience, like the actual visceral time space experience is better, right? It's more vibrant. Yeah. because I went to that place where none of it existed for a little while. And so that sort of dance is what I really began to appreciate. And then in times of personal darkness and anguish, man, meditation really saved my ass. Like when you really are kind of laid low and you don't have, I don't know, let's say there's just a lot of dark clouds have gathered in whatever way, personally, professionally, whatever it may be, meditation is just like always there, right? You can literally do it anytime, any place, just go. And that was extremely liberating for me.
And another way I might describe it is the dissolution of subject-object, which, again, if you've never really had that experience, it's like, what the heck are you talking about? You know? Right. But, yeah, I mean, just like I said it in the way of the universe witnessing me witnessing the universe. It's just like you're realizing that the color orange of this lamp at night, that color is in my mind. Yeah. Right? That frequency might be traveling, but the colors, the phenomenon is in the mind. And all phenomena are in the mind. Yeah. You know, it's that when you eat something, there's like a chemical construction to the food that gives it the taste, but you also is dependent upon the receptive mechanism of your tongue and your brain. And so you're recognizing like this thing is, I am creating the universe too. Yeah. And like we are sharing in this creation and this inanimate object and me. Yeah. And you know, that's what quantum physics is pointing out as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost, when you get out of the mind, well, what do you say? Not the mind. The propositional form of knowing, we want to reduce reality to words, little discrete packets that we can understand. But reality, which is beneath words, is much more continuous and interconnected and in constant flux and flow. And so it's like getting into that experience where you are a co-conspirator to the universe in a way. And it sounds kind of woo-woo, but then when you actually experience it, and again, this is where psychedelics, I think, can be helpful. It's like you can drop into that place and then you'll tell that to someone on either a microdose or a macrodose, like, oh yeah, I totally get it. Yeah. Right? Like this language definitely has its limits. I'm experiencing something here that words or, is damn near ineffable, right? It's beyond words in a way. But the paradox here, and we talk about this a lot when we talk about philosophy, is that, okay, well, language is insufficient, but it's also indispensable to human rationality. Yeah. And another one of these areas of, nervous system engineering is study, actually, right? Actually reading, really just reading, and then also writing, and then also conversing. Contemplation. This is another one of those very effective tools for recalibrating the nervous system to be different, right? You can consciously design yourself, right? If you almost choosing who you become in 5 years is like, well, what's your reading list, right? Yeah. What's your workouts? What are your reading lists? Yeah. Who are you spending time with? What are you eating? Yeah. What are you thinking about? What are your routines? Like, again, that idea of being a co-creator of the world around you and yourself. Yeah. This all seems to be like kind of part and parcel of the yogic enterprise.
Yeah. Like I've had clients over the years who are like, just tell me what exercise to do, what weight, how many reps. And I'm like, no, like that's not that helpful. Yeah. Like you have to be in touch with the experience. Yeah. And like people project a lot of things onto me because I'm a yoga teacher and because I'm like kind of fit. It's like, oh, you must only eat this. You must, do X, Y, and Z. And I have a much more harmonious experience with my fitness and health and food. And like, I'm not depriving myself of anything, but you're not going to be seeing me eat Skittles because I recognize it's poisonous. Sure. It literally has poison in it. Yeah. So why is it? It's not a struggle for me at all. Yeah. Well, it's because my health really comes from like reverence for my body, self-respect for my body, treating the body as a temple. And so it becomes easier to just navigate like, what do I really need? Am I doing this thing because I'm like, oh God, I got to hit that PR for this bench press, or I got to get that 6-pack to impress this person, or, anything like that is just, is like, today, do I need exercise? Some of my workouts are killer, and some of them are just, I'm going through the motions. And it's like, I appreciate those exercises a lot, where it's like, I don't really have the ability to kill it here in the gym, but like, I'm taking care of myself here. I'm moving, and I'm just kind of getting rid of some of this tightness or soreness. And, you know, it all just starts from a place of reverence and a place of just treating my body is sacred, and the banal is sacred, and from there, you know, that's like the health philosophy, and I just think that is sorely lacking, where people are always looking for these like bottled up answers, and programs, and you know, unfortunately, those things do really well because because
there's no
it's
responsibility,
marketable, you know, a little bit of lack of responsibility. And I mean, people need help. So like something easy and clear is good, but it's like, I'm always trying to tell my students, some of my students be like, oh, you got me here. And be like, no, I guided you, but you put the work in.
Absolutely.
You know? And I'm trying to constantly pass the ball back in their court and be like, you know, when you shift this way, how does that feel? Does it you feel more or less? Like I can tell you what's the like proper way to do this. And how to align yourself, and like, of course, like, oh yeah, for sure, I feel that more. But I'm like, why don't you just be a little curious and explore that a little bit, and like, you'll find a lot of these truths yourself. And you know, that's one of my
So you have the dialogue with the teacher, which you're providing. But the teacher's a purpose of yours is to get the student to establish that dialogue with themselves, right? Because ultimately they are the arbiter of their own health, success, well-being.
To be a little bit of a mirror for these people sometimes. You know, like yoga in India was one guru and one student. Like the student would like go seek out the teacher, and the guru would like show up. And now it's like you go to a class, and the guru can't know all the students, you know? And we all have different compositions, like in Ayurvedic, which is like Indian health, nutrition, constitution kind of system. It's like you have different amounts of elements. So you might have more fire, more water, more earth, more wind. Different people need different things. So like the guru would get to know the student and be like, you need to do these poses. I'm assigning these postures for you, these meditation techniques. Because there's not just, meditation doesn't just mean like one thing, right? You can meditate on different kinds of things. There are different types of meditation. And you know, you need a different diet. Like you, Robert, need this diet. Peter, you need this diet, because you guys have different mixtures of this element. And this is quite true. I mean, what was the word you used? Individuality. It's so true. I mean, it's true even with just like medication, you know, in the West. And
it reminds me of that quote too, that no man ever steps into the same river twice, because it's not the same river and it's not the same man. It's like, again, back to that complexity, continual flux of reality. Like that's why you have to be the arbiter of your own health. You're not going to find the guru that knows you better than you. Right. Like you, and this has been a big lesson I've learned going through the health journey. It's like, initially my stuff was messed up. And I'm like, oh, I need to find a doctor to give me the thing to fix it. And then over time you're like, no, that's not how this works. Like you have to become your own doctor to some extent. Doesn't mean you can't seek guidance and help. But the responsibility always lives with you, right? Like you have to have sovereignty over your own health and own well-being.
But I mean, Buddhism does emphasize the need for teachers, though. For that there are times when teachers do know more about you than you know yourself, right? That's why we go to therapists sometimes, is like there are shadow sides where people aren't willing to look at or dig up. And that's when the teacher really becomes important. Like that dark corner that I'm not willing, that cave I'm not willing to go into. Like, you know, I'm going to point you through that way. So again, that's a balancing act. That's a play.
The other one was, in terms of hedonic engineering, was solitude / contemplation, because I think they sort of go hand in hand. Like meditation, you could do alone or in a group, but there's not so much contemplation occurring there, because you're really focusing on the breath and trying to get out of the propositional mind. But in solitude, you know, hiking through nature, or really just spending time alone, doing anything, and just letting the unconscious mind unfold, right? Whatever comes up, let it come up, right? And just observe the thoughts and let them not, whereas in meditation, you're trying to get back to the breath, right? Like let go of the thought. in contemplation, it's more about just allowing the thoughts to come up
Yeah.
and process them, think about them, do whatever you want. And you said something interesting about that was that ultimately it's how you feel when you are alone is the basis of your reality.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of that other quote, right? Like most of man's problems stem from his inability to sit in a room by himself alone.
Yeah.
And so it's cultivating that capacity to just be with yourself and your own thoughts.
Yeah.
And as you age, charts show or studies show that you actually tend to spend more time alone as you age. So this is also, philosophy has been described as training for death or preparing for death in a way. It's like you're also making yourself better fit for your future.
Yeah.
Like you're going to spend more time alone as you age if you're a normal person. So how you feel alone is the basis of your reality. You need to train and prepare accordingly.
Yeah. Stoics talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
Epictetus, he talks a lot about, preparing yourself for death. And I would do that on my walks at night too. Just like imagine this is the last walk.
Yeah.
Imagine this is the last song I'm listening to.
Negative visualization, they call that, right?
Yeah. I suppose. I mean, and it got like, I feel very content where it's just, I mean, if I die today, tomorrow, like it just is, and like there's a lot of comfort in the fact that humanity will just go on. But it's like, again, it's it's not the years in your life, right? It's the life in your years. And I spent a lot of time in solitude. I have done that for many years. That's just was like my natural instinct was like, I'm going to read all these books that were not assigned to me in high school. Like, this is what I want to read. I want to read this crap over here. I want to practice this craft over here. And there was a lot of busy work that I had to get through to like really pursue my passions. And, I have done enough things where I felt like my life is really long, and like I recognize I'm still quite young actually, and like in relative terms, but like I feel very full in life. And so now I'm trying to actually reach out more to community, to what other impact can I have? Really, how can I help other people? Because I know I have something that people who are wealthier than me often are missing, and that they struggle. They have to like align the heavens and earth to have this moment of peace and happiness. And, it's just quite there for me. And so, that's what we're trying to create is helping people to find their purpose, to find the tools and modalities to navigate the bumps in the road, to regulate and make this hedonic kind of engineering to get themselves to these vibrated higher frequencies. And, then that positive impact would only have ripple effects.
Yes. You talked about this as finding your holy grail.
Yeah.
And you talked about the philosophy of significance and how, we've already talked about this a little bit, right? Consciously reconstructing one's own mind, one's own body.
Yeah.
Bringing the involuntary processes of the body into more voluntary control through that mechanism of the breath. You can slow your heart rate in stressful situations, augmenting the immune system, as you mentioned. But ultimately, this is about getting us out of the gross physical body into the subtle energetic body, right? We're becoming more in tune with our fundamental nature. And you mentioned this term, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, pranamaya kosha.
Yeah, pranamaya kosha. It's the outer layer. So prana again being like chi or life force, and kosha is like there's different levels of your body, and the pranam is the energetic level around the body. Which people are familiar with, even though they're not aware they're familiar with, which is just like like I had a bad vibe, or I'm sitting here, my back to the door. And I didn't hear anyone walk through the door, but like, I pick it up, or like I come behind you, I'm just going to hover my hand above your arm. You're going to start to feel it. Eyes at you. And, and science is trying to look at like this pranamaya kosha of the energetics of people's bodies in different emotional states and be able to see and read and pick up the aura that's around people. And, that's again, where if you're vibrating a higher frequency, you're going to be attracting what it is that's aligned with that is resonating with that frequency.
Yeah. I remember being in, as you're saying that, I was in Costa Rica. There's a place called the Yoga Institute down there. Maybe it's in Nosara. I can't recall exactly.
Yeah, Nosara is a pretty popular place for yoga.
And they had this sort of a stone temple building, and you like walked up some stairs to get to the top of this open air temple that's right above the jungle canopy. You're kind of overlooking the trees. You can see the beach in the background. And the girl I was dating at the time and I were walking up the stairs, and we got up there, and the teacher was already there. She's like, oh, I knew you guys were coming. And we're like, what? How did you know? Like, it's, the wind's blowing. You can't hear us walking up the stairs. It's like, there's no way. And she's like, well, everywhere you go, you have like a 25-foot energy field that extends around you in all directions. She goes, and sometimes I can pick up on that.
Yeah.
So I knew it was two of you were coming. And I was just like, what in the world? It was like early in my yoga journey. And I was like, this lady's a trip. But it's true, right? Like we are energetic, right?
Yeah.
We talked about phantom limb syndrome, right? Where people lose a limb, but they can still feel it.
Yeah.
There is like this energetic template on which the physical body manifests itself. And so if you actually lose the physical component, well, the template's still there.
Yeah.
So people still feel that experience. And what is then, if we are focusing on the subtle body and learning to tap into more of our energetic selves, what are the actual practical implications or lessons that we then bring back into our normal life from that recognition?
Well, you asked me about the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
So Nietzsche has this idea of the eternal return, which is this idea of like you're going to live your life exactly the same over and over again for eternity. And if you're willing to accept that, then you're living the life of the Übermensch, the overman, the person who's following their own will to power. And, I had this kind of thought of like, well, I don't know if every moment I need to live like eternally, but there's certainly moments along the path that become these holy grails, these moments of significance that are certainly embedding and imbuing my life with meaning. And so in my philosophy degree, there's a big debate. Like it was an analytic philosophy school. So there's the argument of materialism of like, is consciousness just materialistically determined by the body? And, I don't know if I have like ironclad analytic arguments to shut that down, but it's like, I don't like that idea just like as a feeling. So how can I make an argument for how consciousness in the phenomenal realm has influence over the material realm? And it was like, well, we align ourselves to these North Stars, to these holy grails. So sure, let's give materialists their argument and say consciousness is materialistically determined. And so you're having these conscious experiences, and then you choose in a deterministic way that I want to align to this phenomenal experience, to this value, to this truth, this vibration. And in doing so and pursuing that, you start to have the phenomenal experiences, which then have epigenetic influence over your body. So you're turning certain genes on, certain genes off, which is giving you your neuroplasticity, shifting. So it's in the act of actually having the experience that changes top-down causality onto the physical substrate. So not everything is just bottom-up being determined, because if you don't have that phenomenal experience, then it doesn't continue. The cycle of consciousness doesn't really continue. And so there's this kind of bottom-up, top-down causality both ways. So like go back to your last question of like, what are, just some of the tools we already talked about with music and dance and partnership and sex and contemplation and philosophy and breath and movement. All those things also give you phenomenal experiences.
Right. Those are their own holy grails.
Their own holy grails. Yeah.
So that's interesting. What a great framework for creating a dream life then, or an ideal life is like, how many holy grail experiences can I create such that if I had to relive this entire life over and over again ad infinitum, that what's the highest percentage chance that I would say yes to that, basically, right? The more holy grails you have, the more you would be willing to do that.
Right.
That's a great challenge.
And I want to highlight that is not just, oh yeah, I had sex with this many people. I went to this many countries. I built this many businesses. I got this much money.
It's almost the opposite of that, actually.
It's almost the opposite of that. Yeah. It's how fulfilled was each minor moment. Yes.
Right.
Life isn't lived just in all those big moments. Life is lived in making your coffee and cleaning your dishes and, just sitting here right now having this conversation, just in every little thing. I mean, it's, and like we'll say in Buddhism, of like before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Yeah. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Right.
I just love that. It's so beautiful. It's like, wait a minute, you're telling me there's enlightenment in carrying this water and chopping this wood?
Yes.
Holy cow. Yeah. And Buddhists will also say, and like the act of sitting and trying to practice the Dharma is the enlightenment. Right. People are like waiting for the skies to open and the heavens to come through and like the angels come down singing, and it's just I'm doing this thing and I recognize that in this massive time space continuum, here I am, and that is unique.
I love that you connected that to chop wood and carry water, which is work, right? This is the unique dimension, or a unique dimension of being human, right? Is that we understand our own mortality. So therefore we work, right, to prepare for the future, right? It's really built into us in a way that it's not in animals. I mean, obviously animals prepare for the future to some extent, but not the way humans do, right? We build entire civilizations. And the act, right? You said the act of sitting in Dharma is Dharma, right? I think is how you put it.
Yeah.
So this emphasis on human action, which really ties back to a lot of my studies of praxeology, is like, oh man, it's all human action all the way down.
Yeah.
Even the dissolution of subject-object, as you were saying, right? Coming into that present moment where the subject and the object, or the knower and the known, are no longer distinguishable, right? That you have dissolved the categorical structure that we're superimposing on a continuous reality, and you're just coming into the pure continuum of existence, right? And it's, again, may sound woo-woo, but there's something so vitalizing about that. It's like, I've often said when I come out of meditation, I feel like I took a spiritual shower or something, I just feel so cleansed and rejuvenated and like clean. And, that's so powerful. It's just chop wood, carry water, and the act, right? The action.
Yeah.
And embedded in that understanding, if it's just all human action, it's all about how you act. What Mises defined human action as the purposeful use of means to pursue ends, right? Embedded in that idea of human action is human freedom, right? That it is ultimately up to us to choose what ends are we going to pursue, right? What top of the mountain are we going toward? And what path are we going to take to get there, right? What means are we going to take to get to the top of that mountain? So...
because I think the top of the mountain is the same for everyone. The path is different. Right. People envision that the top of the mountain is to have built this business, to have that relationship.
And when you say the same, you don't mean the same outcome, like building the same business, dating the same woman. It's the fulfillment.
The same fulfillment. Yes. Yeah. Human beings all need the same thing, really. Right. Yeah, I mean, it looks very different on the outside and manifests very differently. And, but, that's the beauty. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Yes.
Is a different manifestation. But we all need really that peace, that contentment, that fulfillment. I mean, you talked about taking that spiritual bath of meditation. We've talked about Vipassana, so hopefully someday you can have enough space for a 10-day silent meditation retreat.
Yeah, that's crazy.
No talking, no reading, no writing. I mean, and it's
no looking in the eyes.
No looking in the eyes, no gesticulating. And you get up very early and you meditate a lot, and you'll find, I mean, you'll be not just a spiritual bath, right? You'll be in a spiritual soak.
Ocean.
Exactly. It's Buddha's teachings that Buddhism really didn't take root in India.
Oh.
It moved kind of like to Bangladesh, Myanmar. I mean, north became Mahayana Buddhism, the great vehicle. Then to the southeast and to like Thailand, Cambodia, it was more Theravada Buddhism. But those teachings that Buddha was teaching came back. I mean, they travel around the world, but India is a culture with many cultures, right? And so they're very Hindu, but there's a big mixture, and like Hinduism is a religion that will accept everything. It will consume everything as just, again, this is the dance. This is a different manifestation of the creation. And what you're doing in Vipassana meditation is you're just body scanning, and you're just observing for shifts and sensation in the body, because what Buddha was teaching is that your body's in constant flux, and we're not really aware of it, right? I tell you, feel the ground on your left foot, bam, you feel it, you know? Well, that feeling was there. Your brain was closing that aperture to make it, so that you can focus on this. Right. So there's so much more, and that's what yoga is doing, is opening the horizon, open the aperture to be able to perceive more all at once. And so you're doing that, and you're scanning your body, and what you're doing is you're trying not to react to the sensation, good or bad. Right. And in doing that, you're rewiring your nervous system to no longer be reactive. You can be responsive, as we said this earlier, but not like just knee-jerk reactive. And he's talking about that life has suffering, but suffering, the second noble truth is that you can end suffering. And it's when you can get rid of your attachments and your aversions. Subconsciously, he's teaching that all times you're examining, do I want more of this? Do I want less of this? Do I want more of this? Do I want this? Think of that like dialogue in your brain at all times. Even though you're not like consciously thinking, it's there. Yeah. Do I want more of this? Do I want less of this? That sounds stressful. That's a headache, like what a way to live, just pushed and pulled. Yeah. And, sure, you can do these other meditation techniques where you're maybe like envisioning metta love for those around you, for those you dislike, for the whole world. There's many different meditation visualizations, but what you're doing, he's saying, you're trimming like the bushes. Yeah. You're not getting to the root. Right. The root is in the nervous system, the samskaras, the habituations, the reactions of, I'm attached to this, and I'm having aversion to this. And in sitting in stillness and feeling an itch come up and not itching it, feeling like your foot fall asleep and not shifting, feeling boredom but not getting up and doing something to entertain yourself. And all that, you're rewiring your nervous system. Wow. And you're finding equanimity. And that's how you really disentangle yourself from the reincarnation of needs, of the ego. Right.
Of constantly being pulled around by the world, right? Yeah. You become centered in this really, sounds like freedom again, right? Because I think a goal, maybe the goal in Buddhism is nirvana, right? This place of freedom. It also reminded me of Viktor Frankl's Final Human Freedom, right? That between every set of circumstances and our response to them, there's a gap, right? Where we get to choose. Yes. Even if you're being tortured, right?
Yes.
Like you get to choose how you're going to respond to that situation. Obviously, Viktor Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And so there's all of this similar principle that's been discovered through different practices, right? In different ways. Yeah. And the essence of it seems to come down to this like freedom of human action, right? How do we interact and engage with our reality?
Freedom from. Yes. Freedom from the need to have this or the need to not have that. To not be in that circumstance. Right. Right. Because there's that freedom in the sense of I have all the money in the world and no laws to worry about and I can do anything. And I do it all, but yet still I don't have equanimity. Still I don't have happiness. Still I don't have healthy relationships.
Yeah, so the freedom from attachments or aversions, as you said.
And both of those really matter, It's you can't just have freedom from attachments or you can't just have freedom from aversions. It's really that balancing act.
Both,
It's both.
So freedom from, again, attachments like the things you want, your desires, your aversions would be the things you don't want, fears almost. But again, life and reality are just flowing and constantly happening.
Yeah.
Good things will happen. Bad
Yeah.
things you want to happen. Things you don't want to happen will happen. And the degree, when you grab on to the things you want or try to push away the things you don't want, you start to create a distance between what is real and what you want to be real or don't want to be real.
Yeah.
And in that gap, basically, is suffering, right? And not accepting what is true, what is real.
Yeah.
You're creating suffering,
Yeah.
or at least enhancing it. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess if you're going through some kind of physical pain, like there is some intrinsic suffering to that. But if you add to it a resistance and push it away, then you're going to actually make it worse, right? Reminds me of that other quote that when you worry about something, you like suffer it twice, right? Like once in the anxiety and then once in the happening.
I've seen this so many times, you know, and I mean, and I've also experienced it. Just there's plenty of scenarios I've been in where I've had my own injuries, I've had different setbacks, and it's just like, okay, but this is temporary. Change is the only constant. So I know that, and I'll settle into that, you know, and know that this isn't going to be here forever, good or bad. And I've seen the people who, I mean, and you see this in yoga poses too. It's just like, whoa, just settle, and like, you'll be surprised where this goes, you know?
And so the freedom from then is like a prerequisite to the proper use of freedom to, right? That you need a proper relationship with your aversions and attachments, which is ideally an acceptance of them in a way that neutralizes them. Ideally, I don't know if that's completely possible. Maybe that is enlightenment in a way.
Yeah.
But in that acceptance, all of a sudden you are free to do more things. And the stereotypical example we were using when we were discussing this offline was like, you could imagine a billionaire who's very free by material means, but if he's a slave to his own carnal desires, right, well, then he's not really free, right? Because he has some addiction to whatever, drugs or sex or whatever the thing is, that's actually governing his life. It's his North Star. And so, again, there's that would be an attachment, I guess, right? That's sort of subsuming his material freedom. So it's not enough to just have material means. It's the inner work is equally, if not more important than the outer means.
Definitely. Definitely. And I wouldn't trade my shoes for theirs, you know, I wouldn't trade places for that situation.
Yeah. We were talking about Diogenes, the old ancient philosopher, the dog that lived in the barrel. And when Alexander the Great approached him and said, you know, hey, whatever, I've heard about you, Diogenes, you know, can give you whatever you want. He goes, okay, well, could you scoot a couple of feet to the left because you're blocking my sunlight?
I mean, he was lambasting a lot of the philosophers back then for all their like highfalutin ideas, basically, you know, and this goes back to, it's like, you can't think your way out of these attachments and aversions. Right. You know, that's why these embodiment tools are so important. You have to practice them.
Yeah. And then this is such an interesting connection to the idea of wealth, right? Because so if economic scarcity is wherever demand exceeds supply, so there's more desire for the thing than there is quantity of the thing. Therefore, we have to distribute it through a pricing system. We got to bid for it, or we have to fight over it. That's scarcity. So the opposite of scarcity would be wealth, right? Where you actually have more of the thing than you need or more than you desire. That means you can be wealthy while being actually materially impoverished if you lower your desires low enough, right? Which that is Diogenes, basically. He's saying, I don't want anything. I'm happy in my barrel, basically. And so he has practiced this relinquishment of attachment to materiality and material accoutrements or whatever you want to call this in such a way that he is basically, he wants for nothing because he wants so little. And so he is somehow on this equal footing with Alexander, right? He's controlling, he has most wealth in the world, but his desires, he hasn't dealt with these desires internally.
I mean, you got to ask what drives a man to travel across Asia, killing and conquering, right? It's that need to leave his name on the pages. And I mean, the Odyssey talks about this, where Homer goes to the underworld and Achilles is like, screw fame. What is it doing for me here?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So Diogenes might have been a lot more wealthy than Alexander.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, that is such a radical concept in this day and age, where people think it's just pursue material wealth at all costs. And I must fully admit, it's not I can't imagine being Diogenes, frankly. I don't know that in talking about that, I feel like getting into my own spiritual immaturity in a way. I'm like, I don't think I could live in a barrel and just like,
yeah, it would be tough.
Yeah,
for sure. But you know, we've seen examples like, because you were talking about the sunlight that Diogenes is getting. I'm like, oh my God, the sunlight.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
It's something we take for granted. And I've seen videos of kids who are deaf when they get ear augmentation, they can hear, and like, oh my God, they're brought to tears. Yeah. You know? And I've thought about that too, of like, if you've never seen blue sky or green grass, and then suddenly you can see that, like how profound that would be. Yeah. And you would go, I mean, you would just be like, wow, this is God's creation. I mean, I don't mean that in a religious term. It's just like, this is creation, right? This is just like, holy cow. And can you continue to stay in touch with that? Yes. And that's the beginner's mind. Zen emphasizes, or freedom from the known that Krishnamurti talks about. Right. It's like, forget about the past. What is it now that you can learn here in this present moment? And the beginner's mind is that childlike mind. The child is amazed by so many things, and we're like, that's simple. That's what's so fascinating about that, you know. But they're just in awe, and that's like something, if you can touch with that childlike energy. I mean, again, energy is its own delight, and children are delightful in their energy, and so there's true wisdom and true truth and true frequency and vibration with that,
and real wealth, right? That, like you're saying, finding, I think, would you say the sacred and the banal, right?
Yeah.
That just the simple, very common everyday experiences, that there is this beauty in them.
I don't know. I used to read a lot of graphic novels, and Watchmen. People are pretty familiar with that because it became a movie. Watchmen, there's this guy, Dr. Manhattan, who like dies in this like scientific experiment and reconstitutes himself. Almost omnipotent being. He goes to Mars, and this is a period where the Russians, is like Cold War, and Americans are like about to have nuclear war. And so one of the characters goes to Mars to try to get him to come back, because he can like basically turn these nukes into sand. Yeah. And like, come save us, you know? And he's being like, oh, you know, you humans, like I see like more happening in the grain in the sand and the atoms and just like the planets than all you humans. And then he has this epiphany that like in the entire universe, humans are incredibly rare. And that actually what it took to bring you here today in life, and all your forefathers and mothers, and just like that is like that's alchemy, that's turning lead into gold. And so he's like, this is actually something worth saving. And again, that just keeps going into the sacred and the banal. It's when there's 8 billion of us, it's like, oh, it was another human, whatever, right? You know? They died. And, you know, we do get, unfortunately, desensitized to the news too, but it's like people, it's like, it's important. It's so hard, right? It's like, how can you listen to the news and like understand really like, this is the impact of what's happening. And yet, how do you protect your own mental health? And I mean, that's something I play around with a little bit myself. Yeah.
Well, the fact that it's such a long sequence to get here. Yeah, the whole thing, you know, civilization too, and you can see where we get off course. It's not a foregone conclusion that we're just going to keep progressing. Right? Like we saw the Dark Ages, right? We miss a few steps and we go backwards, and it's hopefully a motivating factor to keep us moving forward. You know, the proverbial fire under the ass, but. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem like we're maybe going the right direction today.
Well, I mean, we're both Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we have hope in this technology bringing truth.
Yeah.
into reality. I mean, Bitcoin is responsibility technology. You have to, know how to self-custody it properly. And consciousness is responsibility technology. You just think consciousness is this thing that's just happening, but you are responsible for your experiences. And it's not what is happening to you, it's how you react to it. There's a responsibility in that. And, Bitcoin is backed by an energy network. Consciousness is backed by an energy network. And so there's a lot of correlates there between Bitcoin and sort of just, I don't want to say spirituality, but just, some of the teachings of the spiritual traditions.
Yeah, and you have to, as you said, every right is a responsibility. We often talk about that in terms of private property rights, but it's also true of, your consciousness, as you're saying, right? Like it is at least partially a product of your choices, your conscious choices. We even say that, right? Conscious decisions. And if you choose properly, well, then you can enjoy the rights to what it's like to be alive, right? You can go and do these hedonic things and discover holy grails and all of that, but there's a responsibility that you actually take care of it, right? Take care of yourself, take care of this whole thing that we've created that facilitates human flourishing and I guess the good use of human consciousness. So
yoga philosophy, they say consciousness is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat is truth and Chit is consciousness and Ananda is bliss. So like true bliss consciousness is our birthright. It's where we're meant to be. And it's getting rid of, it's like getting the dust off that filter, and that Sat, Chit, Ananda, that true bliss consciousness is there for us. And we're trying to add all these things on top to get there. And that's our responsibility is in how we manage that.
And that's the meditation, right? Where you're sort of polishing the mirror that we're just reflecting our birthright, as you said, right? What we actually are, that we are, what's that one saying, that we are the universe observing itself in a way, right? That we obviously emerged from this reality, but now we can reflect upon it and even influence its course. Maybe not in the sense of changing the laws of physics, but we can certainly change the course of human lives, right? By the ethical frameworks we create and et cetera. Okay, so obviously everything we've talked about today has a very spiritual flair to it. That word gets thrown around a lot, but I think it's worth talking about because contrary to conventional wisdom, I think the spiritual and the rational are actually very closely related. As whereas most people would think they're kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum. I believe this was Heidegger's definition of spirit: the I that is in we and the we that is in I. So this idea, and this is how children mature, right? They actually internalize the perspective of others into their own cognitive framework, and that's how they mature, right? So the 3-year-old maybe tries to go in the cookie jar and mom says, hey, don't do that. Well, the 5-year-old has internalized, maybe the 6-year-old, 7-year-old has internalized mom, knows not to do that, so they don't do that, so they're more mature. So there is that, the we, right, the cognitive models that we have, cognitive avatars maybe of other people that we've created and internalized into ourselves, allows us to become more mature by thinking through the eyes of others, so to speak. And then obviously, the I that is in we, I mean, you're a participant in we, right? You're part of the world. You're a participant in history. You are one of those avatars being internalized in the cognitive framework of other people. So the spiritual typically sounds like a woo-woo term, but I think it's much more something that's rational, right? It's kind of the ratio, if you will, which is the root word of rational, between that I and the we and vice versa. And so how do you mentioned the word, I don't know, Jnana.
Jnana yoga.
Jnana yoga.
I talked earlier, Jnana yoga being the branch of knowledge of, knowledge yoga. Yoga scriptures, yoga philosophy, contemplation, which is, I mean, I'd say Raja, like physical, I was a very physical being young, but I have definitely loved ideas from an early onset. And I read books sometimes knowing I'm not really going to learn anything new, but just as a meditative practice itself, the ideas. And a lot of people have reported this, like Christian philosophers back in the day, Aquinas, and, talking about just reading certain scriptures and getting these transcendent experiences just from the reading.
Yeah.
Like, I think understanding is spiritual in itself in a way, right? You have to move beyond just yourself.
Yes.
And I mean, what do we recognize spirit in? A lot of times we say it's just like only human lives have value. Right. And, I'm not here to talk about vegetarianism or carnivore or anything like that, but like, you can kill the animal and still have reverence for it, right? Like ancient traditions would do that. They would make a prayer. They would eat nose to toe or nose to tail, excuse me, of the animal, right? They just understood the value of this creature. And, like I see a spider on the wall, I put a glass on it, I slide a piece of paper, I let it out. Like, why? Because I just understand that, like, if I'm just like, kill it, and that just becomes your baseline.
Right.
That's not very spiritual. And, I don't think that's very rational either.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point too. We said the I that is in we, the we that is in I, but there's also, I forget who this was. It was a particle physicist where he said he had to actually love the particle. He had to like empathize with the particle, put himself in the position of the particle to build out the framework. I wish I could remember which scientist this was, but there's this idea that maybe we're not just internalizing other people, but we're internalizing the very concepts we're trying to understand, right? I know when I'm reading and thinking through some of this deeper philosophical material, it's not even linguistic the way my brain's moving. There's much more of energy dynamics, or there's something like the way like amorphous bodies would move, like different liquids moving and how things connect, and like the concept looks like some type of organic chemistry experiment in my mind, and then I'm also trying to map words to it at the same time, if that makes sense. And
yeah, that's fascinating. The brain works by patterns, right? Let's say that you use 10% of your brain. It's not like you only use 10% of the brain. It's that you're only using 10% at one period of time, right? The brain is using a lot of the glucose in your body, even though it's not very much of the weight of your body. It's just a very energetic, demanding thing. And so, I can see that sort of amorphous pattern you're talking about, sort of murmurations of birds flying in flocks.
Yeah, like an energetic murmuration.
They just change and it's not coordinated. And yes, self-organizing, and it's like telling a story almost. So again, putting yourself outside of just who I am. What is this thing? I mean, imagination is more powerful than knowledge, right? That's what Einstein said. And so I think the imagination is stretching the rational into the spiritual.
Yeah. So this again, there's this deep interpenetration between the spiritual and the rational. Yeah. And when you do change, back to the beginning, right, where you said the body is the ground of the mind is the ground of the body. When you change one, you can change the other, basically, right?
Totally. And I'm not yet a parent. My partner and I will look to have a child soon, and we're learning a little bit about how you frame things for your kids and how that affects them. And you actually have to be a little bit cautious about overpraising your kids, because when they do something, you're like, oh my God, that's so amazing. That, what you're teaching them is like, look for your validation through me. Bring it to me. I'll validate it for you. Instead, you can say, oh, that's lovely. Like, how does that make you feel? From a very young age, you can start to get them to look internally for that, what we look for when we're adults even, right? And we're just not aware of like how language will do that to us a lot.
That's a great, I think, point on all of this that we didn't touch on, is how focusing on your own spiritual development, the development of mindfulness, the development of moral virtue, which I guess a lot of this has to do with, it's not just about you and improving your life. In the extreme example, it's about being the good example for your children. And in the broader, less extreme example, it's for being a good example for those around you, right? Like, and again, back to embodying your philosophy. It's not enough to talk about it. You've got to walk the walk, so to speak. And that maybe that's a good motivation for people. Maybe the people that like, I don't feel like working out, or whatever. It's like, well, it's not all about you. It's not just about you and your fitness and your well-being. Do you have kids? Do you want to have kids? Well, think about them, right? Think about them when you wake up in the morning and don't want to go to the gym, or you don't want to sit in meditation. Like, it's not all about you. Yeah. And I find that there's those experiments sometimes that people won't fill their own prescriptions, but if it's for their dog, they'll fill the prescription and make sure he takes the whole thing, right? Because sometimes we take care of others more than we take care of ourselves in a way. So maybe that's a good leverage point to encourage people to adopt this and take it more seriously.
Yeah. I mean, I see that in some people close to me in my life.
Yeah.
And it's not easy when it's like, you didn't raise me this way. Like, I was taught, step up, you can do this, like, go the uncomfortable, and you're settling into this place that's not, it's just comfort, and it's no longer any growth. And I mean, that's spiritual. Step outside yourself for sure.
Yeah. Spiritual and rational.
Right? And rational.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It is. Yes, it is.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground, and I guess we should sort of go into what this is all about. The reason we're even having this conversation, right, is that we've touched on a lot of things. I don't want to call these problems per se. I mean, I guess in a way they're perennial problems. This is like the challenge of being human. Yeah. In talking about this, one of the ideas you threw out was calling this retreat the Level Up Retreat. Yeah. Using the video game as kind of a metaphor for the spiritual experience of being human, right? That you are you're in this single player game.
Yeah. An avatar.
You're an avatar. There's a lot of other players, right? It's a massive multiplayer open world map, right? Yeah. Literally 8 billion people. And you really do get to choose your own adventure. You don't have to do it. You can't do it all on your own, right? You learn with other people, but you do participate in choosing your own idiosyncratic path through life. And I get this idea, I don't know, a lot of people maybe, as you said, everyone sort of wants the same thing, right? They want to be happy. They want to be fulfilled. They want to be loved. They want to belong. So the top of the mountain is the same in an experiential sense internally, although it manifests outwardly very differently. But I think a lot of people get confused as to what that is, right? They'll start to over-index on career or money, or they'll over-index on drugs or whatever the thing is. And you'll miss the balance, right? You'll miss this idea of creating the holy grails, right? How many holy grails can you create throughout your life? So what are the problems, these perennial problems we're trying to solve? You named several of them, right? Spiritual, mental, physical health.
Those are eternal markets: health, wealth, happiness. Yeah. Everyone's in the market for that.
Right.
So reframing, what does that mean for you? How do you get there? I mean, what are the tools to get me there? What are the heuristics to follow for that? And I mean, what else did we talk about for that?
Yeah. So meaning, purpose, developing the North Star. Because the other thing, it's not enough. One of the things we said we wanted to do was help people establish a deeper relationship with themselves and their own dreams. Like, what do they really want out of life? I know me personally, 10 years ago, I'm 38 now, so 27, 28 years old, my North Star was off. All right, there were things that I wanted in life that I don't want so much now. And this is a product of maturity, becoming a father. I would credit Bitcoin a lot with this too, just getting into it and the philosophy that I've embodied as a result. So helping people, it's not enough to just give people the tools and say, here's how you build your dream life. You also need to really take a hard, what does Socrates say? The unexamined life is not worth living. Yeah. You need to do that examination on your life and make sure you're oriented to the proper North Star before you start making that effort to walk towards it.
Yeah. You know, so space is one thing that a retreat enables. You know, I've had the ability to go on multiple retreats, meditation retreats, travel retreats. I've had the gift to lead different retreats, and they are windows in time that they're just separate from the hustle bustle. You know, the unplugging is like such a value asset in today's world that people forget. You know what it's like to just not look at the phone, you know, not get the bing. And then community is really important too, you know, and like in some of these meditation retreats I've been on, it's not even like I'm communicating with these people. It's just that there's a common understanding and purpose and creates a synergistic cohesion, energy. And so, you know, that's what we're calling to, is we're calling to people who are curious, who are hungry for growth, and people who are willing to put the work in. Yeah. Because like the first step towards everything we've talked about requires effort. Oh yeah. You know, which is something not everyone is in the market for. Right. But that's a beautiful thing too, because you know, you come on retreat with us, you're going to know that everyone who's there is there for a reason, and they're going to be a value add, and you can get insight and teachings from people that aren't just you and I, but other people are there. You know, sometimes it's seeing other people go through those processes that is insightful for people too. So that's what we're looking for, just are people who are ready to have an impact on themselves, to then impact anyone who comes across their path, right? It doesn't mean they need to be Bitcoin evangelists, or doesn't mean they need to become yogis in this deep, meaningful, like, I'm a yogi, right? I like to say I'm a yogi because to me, it's a much broader meaning than just I practice yoga, right? It's like kind of like the ancient word of philosopher. You know, yoga goes way before the physical components. And, but you know, it can be simply just how you the energy change you give with someone. Yeah. Right. I still have both my parents alive, and my partner, her father passed, and you know, she would tell me like someone working behind the desk at like CVS just being like, how are you? Like how impactful that was. These strangers like who would just take a moment to look at her and see like clearly she's going through something, and I'm going to just, you know, say like, it'll get better, honey. Like something, you know, sweet. Like, and it just was like the thing that got her through the day. Yeah. You know? And so like, what would it look like if all of society was doing that? Yeah. Like, you know, you don't have to build the biggest business to have the impact on the world. You know, if we all resonated at a different frequency, the world will look a lot better place. You know, I mean, this is how I think really how you stop war. It's just individually, you say, I'm not going to pick up a gun and go shoot that person. Then the next person says that, and the next person says that, you know, right. Sure. Are the Russians being like coerced? Some of them, some of them are doing it, of course, willingly. Some of them are like being coerced. You're in the draft, you have to go, right? I would like to think if during the Vietnam Wars, I would have said, I'm going to Canada or I'm going to prison. Like those are my two options. It's not going to Vietnam and killing someone, right? Muhammad Ali really stood for that. Yeah. And, you know, that's a spiritual warrior. Yeah. And so if we all did that, war is over. Yeah. It's done, period. Yeah. You know, and also like, that's why we evangelize Bitcoin too, is because it's not like we want people to adopt Bitcoin so that price go up. No, it's because we want you to get on the arc that is protecting you from the flood of inflation of money printing. So it's for your best interest. And, you know, if you adopt it and you adopt it and you adopt it, and we just all do that individually, singularly, the fiat Ponzi scheme's over.
Yeah. And the money printing that funds the warfare that
It's
you
over.
speak of, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Not only is it this individual orientation towards nonviolence, non-aggression,
Yeah.
but there's also the defunding of the system that perpetuates it.
Yes.
And funds it. And these
Yes.
things all go hand in, because you said earlier, right? It's an consciousness is a responsibility network built on an energy system, just like Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so to take dominion over your own consciousness, just like as you take dominion over your own purchasing power through Bitcoin and responsibility for where it goes.
Yeah.
It's these individual acts of self-sovereignty, individual sovereignty that do
Yeah.
move the world, right, in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, well, finding meaning, finding purpose, finding the proper North Star, transcendental truths we've talked a lot about today. There are proper ways to live that have been discovered in many great wisdom traditions across history, right? You know, Christ consciousness is one. We've mentioned Buddha a lot today. There's many figures and many traditions, and there are commonalities among them, right? They've been
so many commonalities.
We've been discovering the same things, right? We've been cultivating these moral intuitions or moral sentiments or ethics that we typically share, right? Like today, killing and stealing, these are sort of ethical or moral universals that you shouldn't do those things, yet we still do them.
Yeah.
But we're at least moving in the right direction. We've come a long way from Hammurabi's code, right? Where it was an eye for an eye. It's like every time someone does this to you, you do it back to them. It's like, well, we've learned different lessons, right? We've learned to turn the other cheek and things like this. So it's, again, at the macro scale, like participating in that continual process of becoming human and becoming civilized, becoming more spiritual and rational, as we said, right? Spirituality and rationality are very tightly bound, which vibrating higher, coming together under a common unity. Community, common unity, and, sovereignty, right? Obviously a really big idea of just reigning over yourself instead of being reigned over by someone else.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Lindy effect, and it's like these things are around because life really wasn't that different 2,000 years ago. It looks a lot different, all the technology, but they all had the same problem, existential problems of meaning and, being raided by the kingdom over the hill and,
human nature was about the same.
It's about the same. And, I lost my train of thought there.
So I guess when we say establishing a deeper relationship with oneself and one's dreams, we're talking about identifying the top of that mountain, right? And it's the same for everyone, right? It's the fulfillment. It's the experience of the sacred. It is the most holy grails, not the most, the highest concentration of holy grails, right? On your deathbed, basically. The radical acceptance of life and the willingness to go out when your time comes, whenever it may come. We summarize that as maybe as like trying to create, if your body is your temple, then creating a temple that is hospitable to the spirit of truth in a way, right? Like there are deep truths about how to be a good person and how to create a good world. And so we want to help cultivate that individually through community. And then with that top of the mountain identified, it's then about giving people the toolkit, right? It's like, okay, there's the top of the mountain. Now your path there is unique to you, right? Everyone's different. We all have different skills and experience and know-how and all of that. But giving people the tools that help them chart their own path to the top of that mountain. And so that, I think, is one way of describing what we're trying to do here. And just one last point is that to tie this back to like spirituality, rationality, that's also a definition of intelligence, by the way, as like the ability to goal seek, right? To select a goal, but then also select different means of getting there, right? So if one path doesn't work, well, then you have the tools or the intelligence to adapt, right?
Yeah.
You can switch to another path. You can, what did Carl Jung use the term circumambulation, right? Where you're going from A to B, but you inevitably get off course. So then you have to rechart your course, and you're constantly trying to home in on the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And so that's what we want to do here, is like give people these tools, right? To not only identify and discover the top of the mountain for them, what that is, that unique manifestation for them, but then also give them the tools to develop their own unique path to get there.
Yeah. And, just a word of encouragement is like, as someone who climbs mountains, don't look at the top of the mountain all the time, right? Like get to the next bend.
The next step, even sometimes.
The next step.
Yeah.
You do that, then you get to the next step, et cetera. And going back to the spirituality, and what I was going to say is like, because we are talking about all these spiritual things, and I know that can be off-putting to people, but it's like, if you read the Bible and everywhere it says the kingdom of heaven, scratch that out and put the Tao or put nirvana.
Yeah, or the universe.
And you read the Tao Te Ching, and where it says the Tao, cross that out and put the kingdom of heaven. You're going to start to realize that all these spiritual texts are saying the exact same thing.
Right.
And, so let that just be, again, that wisdom of like, wait, what had they figured out in the past? That, I mean, come on, like we don't have everything figured out here in today's world. Like we don't have the secrets to the universe. If we did, human flourishing would be much higher. We would be able to create energy, like free energy. And so accept, like, just be open to what you don't know.
Yeah.
And then be willing to learn some new skills, and then, understand what it is that is the top of the mountain. But then just be ready to practice in that next step.
Yes.
Because life is lived in the present moment.
Yes.
And I mean, it's not lived in the future, it's not lived in the past. And like that, let that be the beautiful thing that you take on. Let the present moment be the top of the mountain.
Yes.
Because it is the journey, not the destination.
That's right.
And, you'll be surprised how your life changes.
Yeah. And the body as the dojo. Right?
Yeah.
So like you can prepare or train for all of these potentialities in life, really just in yoga, in the body, in the mindfulness practice. It's universal in its application almost, right? Like you can deal with any stressor, any stressful situation, any circumstances, and you can train for it here. Yeah. Not just in isolation. You need the community because we need one another to see each other's blind spots and all the things we've said, but it's really that, right? And so we want to unite the curious, the ambitious, the compassionate, the hungry, the humble. Right? You need to be humble and willing to learn. Yeah. That's part of, you can't learn if you're not humble, frankly.
Or willing to be wrong.
Yes, exactly. And we want to bring them together under a common unity, right? The common unity, the North Star, the canopy, the symbolic canopy is something, yoga, truth, Bitcoin, right? These integral ideas of what it's like to be human and to be right and to be good in the world. And that's, I think, what
beautiful.
This is about. Yeah.
It's beautiful. And beauty is the antidote to
bullshit.
To bullshit. Yeah. I think it hits with truth. Beauty and truth align. And I mean beauty not in a shallow way, in a very deep way.
Yeah, the philosophical definition of beauty is something like when appearances reveal truth, right? That it's to create a life that's embodying and revealing of these true ancient principles of living, right? The embodied proper philosophy, right?
Yeah. So I'm stoked.
Me too.
I'm excited to see who we meet and what kind of impact they can create as well as we can create.
Yeah. And we have some crazy ideas.
Yes,
we're going to start small and do, be selective about who we bring into this. And we'll do some initial retreats focused on a lot of this type of work. And then we'll work our way up and, see where we go. We have some pretty wild ideas. We've talked about, like walking in the desert and
yes,
going on some spiritual journeys. So I'm very excited too.
Yeah. What a blessing.
and selfishly so in a way, right? Like to actually be a part of this,
this holy grail.
Yeah, it becomes a holy grail in a way, right? Because that's what I want on my deathbed. It's like look back and be like, well, messed up in life enough to know that I needed to change my direction, and then decided to point myself in a direction that helped others, but also helped me along the way, and that's it, right? That's what you want. If you had to live that life over and over again ad infinitum, I would hope everyone would want some version of that life, right? Where they figured out how their path fits into other people's paths to benefit them and be benefited in return. And that is like the reciprocity that makes life beautiful.
Totally. Wow. Thank
Peter,
you, Robert.
Thank you, man. I'm excited for this.
Yeah. Cheers.
Art of Alpha.
Art of Alpha. Leveling up.
The Level Up Retreat, Art of Alpha.
Yeah. And
the Art of Alpha, TAoA. So we might call it something like
TAoA.
TAoA. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were saying alpha as in
that's right.
Alpha leadership. Alpha is in the alpha of information that you get that gives you cutting edge over the market.
That's right.
And then alpha is in the alpha omega.
Yeah. Ancient wisdom. Yeah. Yeah. We talked a lot. That's a great point. We talked a lot about the ancient wisdom component today, sort of seasoned with some alpha, like leadership components here. It's not just leadership. It's also just becoming the best version of yourself, right?
Yeah.
You know, like that.
Yeah. Yeah, because we don't want alpha to carry that negative connotation of
it's not like
toxic
macho,
man,
chest beating, whatever. It's becoming the best version of yourself. And then there is that informational component, which we didn't talk about much at all, but alpha in Wall Street speak is how to outperform the market, right? But depends what your denominator is, as we talked about. Like, it doesn't need to be investment that just beats market returns. This could also be investments that have, returns in other ways, right? If we're investing in community and relationships and whatnot. So that's, that component I think remains to be expounded upon. But yes, that is, thank you for bringing that up, that alpha does have this sort of triune meaning, right? That we're going to try to incorporate into this work. So awesome, man.
Cool.
Looking forward to it.
Likewise.
This September 5th through 9th, 2024, join me on the Pacific coast of Mexico for our first ever men's retreat, which we are calling the Art of Alpha. In a cooperative training environment at a world-class retreat center, we will be having daily meditations, movement practices, yoga, cold plunging, infrared sauna, lymphatic drainage, massage, heart rate variability training, gut health lectures, all while enjoying an anti-inflammatory diet free of allergens and designed for optimal full body health. The retreat center is a gorgeous biohacker's paradise located right on the ocean. You can think of this place as a nervous system reset facility. At the Art of Alpha, we are seeking men who wish to cultivate freedom, wisdom, sovereignty, physical fitness, truth, and love in themselves and in those who look up to them. If you've always felt motivated to push yourself to new limits to discover the best version of yourself, but you've struggled to find the right community to immerse yourself in, then the Art of Alpha is for you. You'll be training alongside a group of men who have been individually selected for their outstanding self-discipline, virtue, and work ethic. To apply to join the first ever Art of Alpha event, go to breedloveevents.com. And yes, I did say you will have to apply, as we will be striving to gather a select group of men for this experience, so there will be an application process. Again, that's breedloveevents.com to apply to join us for the Art of Alpha on the Pacific coast of Mexico, September 5th through 9th, 2024.